Hey, team players, welcome to another fantasy football breakdown. And we're looking at this from a different angle through the lens of the actual teams and how are they going to use these players? Because that's really the important way of knowing if your guy is going to have success. While his numbers are important from last year, it's really what does the team do and how is the team going to use them? In the case of the New York Jets here, it's very hard to say because, Bob, they might be going from the biggest quarterback swing of the entire NFL here, going from literal incompetence to Aaron Rodgers. Although, don't you remember around like week 5 when they kept saying Wilson was going to be the greatest quarterback ever and how Fox can get it wrong so fast?
Yeah.
But with that being said, to me, the starting point where I want to start here is Breece Hall. Obviously, tears his ACL in week 7, and right now is going as a second, third round running back. For a lot of guys, he's the number 1 running back on their team. And that thought scares the death out of me because, first off, the year back from an ACL is never awesome. And second, it normally takes a calendar year, give or take, and he's trying to cut it down to less than 10 months if he does any training camp at all. And that's just not how knees work. Regardless of how modern medicine is, that's just not how knees work. So I look at Breece Hall as a starting point. He might be a fine NFL player by the end of the year, but he is not going to be on any of my fantasy teams because I don't trust the knee injury coming back. And furthermore, the Jets don't have a good offensive line. Aaron Rodgers refused to hand the ball off last year. And I just look at this overall and saying, Breece Hall might have very quickly became a name more than a result.
So when it comes to Breece Hall, there's a lot of things to look at. Looking at his stats, we see a player who really came onto the scene and popped up really fast on a team that was doing fairly well for the New York Jets at the beginning of the season.
He was there, yeah.
They were doing incredibly well. He goes down, and all of a sudden, this team falls apart. He's averaging 5.8 yards per carry,
which was phenomenal.
Which is
so good. I mean, it's with value.
I mean, that's an incredible clip. And when you took him, if you probably got him in free agency last year at the beginning of the season, maybe you draft him in the late rounds. So he was returning a good amount of value for you. Now, when you look at him this year, like Joe said, coming off the injury, better quarterback. However, the quarterback
has an ego. I think that's fair to say.
The quarterback has issues giving the ball off and relinquishing responsibility in Aaron Rodgers. And you have an offensive line that ranks in the bottom tier of the league, bottom third. And so you look at it and you say, well, is this a recipe for success for Breece Hall, especially when you look at the schedule? In my mind, I think the New York Jets are a very complete team that could end up in the Super Bowl next year. And I said this I said this earlier in the season before the schedule came out, and I'm going to repeat it despite this schedule coming out, is, there's a lot of teams on this schedule that with their defense and now with the addition of Rodgers, Rodgers adds a modicum of points, more than Wilson or more than Flacco could ever do for this team. And that's with me also not liking Aaron Rodgers very much. You look at the schedule: Buffalo, Dallas, New England, Kansas City, Denver, Philly. That's all what the Jets are going to lead off with.
It's a hard start.
If Breece Hall is not fully 100% healthy, you're not putting him in those games. You can't put him in those games. And this is one of the things when it comes to drafting.
You look at those first 4 games, aside from the home one against the Patriots, I don't think I'm extremely confident in the Jets at all.
See, I am. I think that the Jets could beat Buffalo. I think the Jets I have.
Oh, they beat Buffalo. Yeah, they're giving the division.
I think the Jets will probably lose to Dallas there. They'll probably win against New England. I think that they'll fight pretty hard against Kansas City, maybe eventually lose, and they'll probably beat Denver. And then they'll have a pretty good game against Philly. They'll beat the Giants. The game against the Chargers will pretty fair. They'll beat Vegas. I think they beat Buffalo again. I think they beat Miami. I think they beat Atlanta. I think they beat Houston.
No, long story short, if you got them beating Buffalo twice, they're winning that division. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And Atlanta, despite, depending on what Desmond Ridder does, that could be what happens here. But for back to Breece Hall, is I think that if you're taking Breece Hall early, you've got to have some backs up. You got to have either a solid number one already, or you got to know what you're going to take in those middle rounds there. And I think for you to take Breece Hall, you're passing up on a lot of talent at wide receiver.
Yeah,
you're passing up at a lot of talent at other running back players. So taking Breece Hall, logistically speaking, here
is a late killer.
You could have a roster already set up of potentially Taylor, Diggs coming around in the third round. You have the chance at guys like Najee. You have potential at Breece. So you're.
See, I'd rather have Najee all day.
But we're not to the Steelers yet. But back to the point here of Breece is that the end of the season looks much friendlier than the beginning of the season, when Breece's injury is probably going to take a bigger toll coming back. So,
but can you take a pick that you need to wait half the season
this is what I'm getting
in the third round?
Guys like DeAndre Hopkins, who we knew were going to get suspended for 6 games, we were drafting those guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds. Kamara, similar. We don't know what that suspension might happen, but he's getting drafted in the 8th and 9th rounds. But Breece Hall, we're all expecting to come back to what he started, and that is an unrealistic expectation in my mind for him to come back where he started, because he started off one of the hottest that he could ever start. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is an upgraded quarterback and gives Garrett Wilson a better position here, but we should be talking about Garrett Wilson and not Breece Hall.
Well, I wanted to start with Breece Hall because, I think there's a lot of risk there that people are just glossing over when they look at their rankings. Oh, Breece Hall, next guy up on my rankings, I'm just going to pick him. There's a lot of red flags around him that need to be addressed. But let's get into Garrett Wilson, because I think Garrett Wilson is one of these guys, the more and more I'm diving into him, the more and more I'm liking him, Bob. I got to tell you that.
Here's the best thing about Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is getting drafted in the 2nd round, but he has the potential to end up at number 1.
He does.
There's a very good reason for this, and we've seen Aaron Rodgers' track record with Allen Lazard last year, and this is just an example. Allen Lazard is an average wide receiver.
At best.
Allen Lazard had like 793 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's an average wide receiver. Garrett Wilson accumulated 4 touchdowns last year and 1,100 yards with let's just
as a rookie.
As a rookie,
that's amazing.
With 3 different quarterbacks.
3 different bad quarterbacks.
So you look at it and you see his average 13.3. That means he was relied on a lot. Now,
yeah, the 83 catches across the season, 147 targets. That put him in the top 10 in target share last year.
Yeah, and the Jets brought in Lazard. They brought in Mecole Hardman. But I think those are more – I think those players – you're drafting those players very late with Lazard. You're not drafting Hardman at all.
Shouldn't.
And you're expecting maybe 3-4 touchdowns out of Lazard, maybe another 700 yards out of him. But with Wilson, you're drafting him in the 2nd round. And these 2nd-round wide receivers could, like I said, they could all – there's a very good case to make that Amon-Ra could end up at number 1. Garrett Wilson can end up at number 1. CD could be end up at number 1. But with Garrett Wilson in particular, he has accumulated that many yards on 83 catches, right? If you extrapolate that out and say that, hey, we could see Devontae Adams and, numbers out of Wilson, you could see him getting 119 catches, because those are going to be, we think, more catchable balls.
So this is the fear with
Wilson. But it has to be that Aaron Rodgers has to like him.
That's the fear. It's Rodgers, right? But without a doubt, he is the most talented Jet. Especially considering the Breece Hall injury, he is the most talented skill player on that roster. Not even close. Garrett Wilson, write him down. And Rodgers, as arrogant as he is, wasn't stupid. He gave the ball to Devontae Adams a lot. And I kind of see this. We're already talking about how the biggest improvement is 1st year to 2nd year. I don't think it's out of the realm for him to average 100 a game. that's kind of where Cooper Kupp was when he was on fire, 100 a game. And the touchdowns are going up because the simple fact is the Jets are not going to be a 34% team on third down anymore. They're going to get better. They're going to have more balls.
Here's the thing. You give Garrett Wilson 100 catches at average of 13.
That's 1,300 yards right there, yeah.
He's getting 1,300 yards, and those touchdowns, they're going to be in the red zone more. Garrett Wilson has a really good chance of making a good step in the red zone because when you look at those other targets, Lazard has a chance to be in the red zone. Very good, very good threat in the red zone as well. The tight ends.
I think Lazard's fallen off, though. I don't think he has it anymore. I know Hartman doesn't have it.
I'm not saying that you should target Lazard. I'm just saying that as a team, as a unit, that when you look at the team and the unit as together here, you have Corey Davis still, Lazard, Randall Cobb, they went out and got, but he's on the pop. And you have Hardman. The choices that
Randall Cobb should not make this team.
The choices that Rodgers has, you could be a fantasy guy and you want to go out in free agency and say Tyler Conklin has a couple of good games or CJ Uzomah comes back and has a couple of good games. But I'm not really targeting the tight ends here out of the Jets, and I'm not really targeting any of the tight ends.
I disagree with that. I think Tyler Conklin might be their second best pass catcher.
Here's why I'm saying I'm not targeting them, is that Tyler Conklin is a guy that you could definitely pick up in free agency.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And it's something that week one comes around, say you need a tight end, you need a streamer tight end. Tyler Conklin's probably going to fill the role pretty well. Tunyon, a la Tunyon and a la the other.
I think he's better than Tunyon, though, just as a football player.
But back to Garrett Wilson here. Lazard isn't a huge threat. Hardman isn't a huge threat. And we know that when Rodgers tees up on a wide receiver and respects their ability and gets to know them, that he is giving that ball to them almost exclusively. If that is Garrett Wilson, I can see a projection of Garrett Wilson at 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns as not being out of the realm of possibility for Garrett Wilson this year. And you're getting him in the second round. You have the potential to have a team that looks like this. Diggs, Garrett Wilson, and then Najee Harris. And I'm telling you,
that's a hard team to beat.
That's not a bad start.
No, it's not.
And say, for example, you don't want to start like that. You can start Austin Eckler, Garrett Wilson. We're a little bit more down on Austin Eckler. You are more than I am.
Yeah.
But still, you can even have a team that could potentially be Christian McCaffrey, Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson is your number one receiver. Will not disappoint. I guess that's the point.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be disappointed in that. And then as it goes for Aaron Rodgers, I think a realistic expectation for Aaron Rodgers would be 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility.
See, I think I think it'll actually be much better than that for two reasons. First, he's not going to have a broken hand the whole year. No. So that was a major part of his problem. It would have been nice if he would have said that. It would have been nice had he disclosed that. And the fact that the league did not penalize him for that is beyond confusing. But when we look at the Jets, one of the other things I like about them, yes, last year Pro Football Focus was very down on them in terms of their offensive line. But three of those linemen, the whole right side and the center, are first or second round draft picks. And in general, that ends up being a pretty good line when it's all said and done. So, with the right side being rebuilt, we'll see how it happens. But I think that there's a very good chance that this Jets offensive line is right up there with the Patriots as far as the best in the division. Instead of right now, it's the Patriots, then a mile until you see anyone else. I think the Jets have a chance of stepping up there. And as you look at that fact, I think that, again, we've seen what happens when you give Rodgers time. He rips you apart. And I think that Rodgers is going to have a massive step forward from what he did last year in fantasy. And I know every show you go back and watch us from last year, it's just hating on Aaron Rodgers again and again and again, which is true because we did it.
Well, Joe, can you?
But I think he's going to step up. I think
pull up his historical stats for a moment, just so we can get a level playing field here on Rodgers, so that I'm not just angry. I'm not just angry at him because I had him and Tua last year, and it was compounded mistakes in there. But when you look at Aaron Rodgers' stats and you go back to previous seasons when he either disclosed an injury or was injured or was healthy, You're looking at 37 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 48 touchdowns, 5 interceptions,
2 and 3
26
years ago,
touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, he's not young anymore, but
that was 2 years ago.
We're looking at the end of this grouping, and he still threw 37 touchdowns when he was healthy. And you're not drafting Aaron Rodgers for 37 touchdowns. You're drafting him based off of what he did last year.
Which is why he's going to be a value.
And he could be a tremendous value this year for you if you're willing to take the chance. I
am.
He is the reason why
Get like the 9th round.
He's the reason, again, why I think the Jets could compete for the Super Bowl. Their defense was strong last year. We know that when Aaron Rodgers has a strong defense, there's good opportunities for him to be successful. He's not going to feel nervous to perform. He's just going to do his thing. And we know when Aaron Rodgers is at his best, he's had 2 seasons of 40-plus touchdowns. And he's had a couple seasons with 30 touchdowns. Or 3 seasons with 45 touchdowns. I mean, like, Aaron Rodgers historically is an elite level quarterback. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback.
And you can guarantee he's getting at least 25 this year, so he gets to 500.
Yeah,
you can guarantee that.
It pains me to say because I just don't like him, but the skill can't be denied. And if you're taking him in the 9th, 10th round, that means you've gotten value at your other positions because you're not reaching for a Mahomes who's going to score 40 touchdowns again. You're not reaching on Jalen Hurts or Trevor Lawrence or Joe Burrow. You are compiling your team. So if you take Aaron Rodgers late, you're giving yourself the opportunity to win. And his floor is 26 touchdowns.
Yeah, because there's no way he's not getting the 20 or 500 career touchdowns. Right now, he's at 475. You can pretty much guarantee the NFL will want to make that happen.
He's played with bad offensive lines before.
Sure has.
And he's played with bad receiving cores. And he's played with bad, running backs that maybe perform less than they should. But Aaron Rodgers makes this team.
And you can even see where the NFL is projecting that he's going to score that 500 touchdown. The Jets have 2 night games in the middle of their year. One in LA and one in Vegas. That is where they're projecting him. He's doing it in Vegas. So this is the point is, he's getting at least 25 touchdowns. He's not going to throw interceptions. I mean, last year was an anomaly because he was hurt. I think that Rodgers, quite frankly, I see him having as good of a year as Burrow and Herbert.
Let's be honest.
And I got to spend a fraction of the cost.
Right? Let's be honest.
Rodgers all day.
If he does get 25 touchdowns, and they do want it to happen, if we're tinfoil hat this, and they do want it to happen on those Monday night games, that means he's averaging 3 touchdowns a game.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much where we're at.
And if he's averaging 3 touchdowns a game,
Garrett Wilson is getting 2.8 of them.
If he's averaging 3 touchdowns a game, and that means he's probably getting 250, 300 yards per game, you're looking at potentially 16 to 22 points a week. And that's what you want out of a starting quarterback with potential to go higher than that.
Yeah, Bob, the more and more we talk about, this is just a Jets overall thing. If they do beat Buffalo week 1, they might be in the Super Bowl. They're winning that division if they beat Buffalo week 1. It's weird to say a week 1 game is going to be that important, but I think it's the case. This team is stacked. When they're stacked in the sense that they have the ability to even Carter, who's not a good running back. I'm not even trying to say this at all. But when we compare them to the other 2 front runners in this division that we just did earlier in the week, Miami, no running game whatsoever. And if Tyreek goes down, they're in trouble. Tyreek might be suspended before we even start.
Well, they have a running game. It's just not good.
Yeah, they don't. That's my point. So Buffalo is redeveloping their offense so Allen can last longer in his career. The Jets are set up. Granted, it's going to be just like Buffalo, forcing everything through Wilson. But they are set up to be a prime player in this. Because Wilson got primary coverage last year with no quarterback play and made it happen.
Here's the reason, though, and this is why I believe in Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers as fantasy studs this year, is that there's a reason why that the Jets have the 6th worst strength of schedule and the other teams have the worst. It's because they have to play the Jets.
Yeah.
So you look at it and you say, well, you're putting strength against strength. And so you have...
And their crossover game's the last place schedule, so they get Cleveland.
You have Buffalo's strength is the pass. That is the Jets' strength. Dallas's strength is the pass. That is the Jets' strength. New England's strength is nothing. So they're going to win that game, right? Kansas City's strength is the pass.
The Jets in New England, the Jets always lose that game somehow. It's just a thing.
Denver again. Philly again. Giants again. Chargers again. All of these teams.
The Jets are going to be a very competitive team, and it's going to be driven through Wilson.
Minus Atlanta, their strength, minus Atlanta and Houston, every single one of the Atlanta, Houston, and Vegas, all of those teams, their strength is the pass. New England,
Dude, I'm not sure
Atlanta,
Houston has a strength.
Houston, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But you look at those teams, all of their strength is a pass. It matches up well. And when when your best part of your defense matches well against their best part of their offense, you can't say the same thing about Buffalo, though. You can't say the same thing about... I mean, maybe
here's the other joy of it.
You can say the same thing about Dallas. Like I said, I think the Super Bowl this year, and I'm just going out on a limb here,
is Dallas and
Jets. It's not going to be, but that's what I feel it could be.
We'll get that a little later on here. But the to your point, when we're normally talking about game scripts, when your team has this much of an advantage, the elites of the elites in the NFL still get the ball thrown to them. But this might be an argument for Wilson that Chase doesn't have. These guys in the Jets are playing the other powerhouse offense of the NFL almost week in and week out. They are never going to be getting to a point like Philly was last year, where they just basically sat down A.J. Brown for the fourth quarter. There's not a chance of these guys consistently blowing teams out like that. So Wilson is constantly going to be, get the ball, we need to score. And that is, to me, I think Wilson, he's going as a second rounder right now. He's right there in terms of the future. He could be Diggs-esque. He's not as talented as Davante Adams is right now in the NFL, because I think only J-Jeff is. That's how much I know Adams is good. But I'd rather have Garrett Wilson all day for this season. And I think that when it's all said and done, we were talking earlier about target share. 140s, top 10, yeah, but you can go higher. 3 of them in the NFL went above 155.
And I guarantee you, if you go out there and you do your research, as we're telling you the resources and where to go, if you look at that 2020 year where Rodgers threw for 48 touchdowns, go to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go to that 2020 year, you're probably going to see Davante Adams, if that wasn't the year he got hurt, go to
Adams.
No, go to the rushing and receiving, which is right there. And where's he at? Was that a year that he was hurt?
Must have been, because he played 14 games.
Okay, there he is. 1,300 yards, 18 touchdowns. Okay. I mean, that's
who else caught the touchdowns that year? Tunyon, ton of fun.
Tunyon had 11 and nobody else basically had above. Okay, so
how did Aaron Rodgers have 2 receiving touchdowns? Oh, that's Aaron Jones. My bad. Okay.
Yeah. So when you go back to 2020 here and you look at, that was arguably the highest output of Aaron Rodgers ever, and that was only 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Davante Adams had 18 touchdowns and 1,300 yards.
Yeah. And the tight end, 11 touchdowns, 500 yards.
I mean, you're looking at it, like we said, Ty Conklin, great waiver wire pickup, because you're probably not going to need to draft him. And Davante Adams, the skill set of Garrett Wilson could, at some point in his career, exceed Davante Adams. I don't know if it will, but it could. And you're looking at Adams with 18 touchdowns the last time that Aaron Rodgers was like on his grind at 48. The next year he had 35 or something like that too. So you're looking and you're saying, okay, well, can he do this again? Can he do this with Garrett Wilson? Absolutely. And there's a very good case that you can make that by the end of this season, Garrett Wilson will be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. And
certainly going to be top 5.
And you're going to be forgetting about you you're like, oh, I drafted J. Jeff number 1. I wish I would have drafted Garrett Wilson.
It's possible. It's totally possible. Don't want to discriminate against JJ. That's going to be a fun episode.
I'm just saying.
Well, regardless, team players, we thank you for being with us. Continue to watch as we go through the rest of the NFL. Tomorrow, we're starting up the AFC West.